Hi, I'm Amitha Balachandra. We are going to talk about what's going on in Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka has seen its worst ever economic crisis since independence, and here are the latest details. There's fuel shortage, food and essential food supplies shortage, drugs shortage, and there are blackouts as well. Amidst all of this, there are protests by citizens asking for the president to resign. In fact, protests took a violent turn with at least 9 people having been killed in these protests. Recently, the Prime Minister also resigned, but there is fresh information now that's just come in that Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe has now been sworn in as the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka. However, he only has one seat in the 225 member parliament of Sri Lanka, and this brings in a lot of uncertainty. What's going to happen next? Will the other opposition parties support this government is the biggest question. We're going to talk about not just this, the political turmoil in the country of Sri Lanka, but also the economic crisis and the state of finances. And to talk about all of this, I have Mr. Eran Wickramaratne, who's the opposition MP. He was the State Minister of Finance before. Mr. Wickramaratne, thank you so much for joining us. Before I go into the latest news that's just come in, I want to first of all understand what is the situation in Sri Lanka at this point.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Sri Lanka is going through an unprecedented period. There's a lot of turmoil. There's economic hardships. At the same time, we are now faced with protests, which were spontaneous protests, civilian-led protests, and more recently, over the last few days, it turned into basically violence because protesters were attacked, peaceful protesters were attacked, and a few people were killed across the country, and you also had several politicians had their houses basically destroyed by some of these mobs that came in. So it's a very uncertain period. The president has called out the armed forces, deployed them on the streets to bring a sense of normalcy. So we are just at that point at this time. The political situation is that the Rajapaksa family has dominated Sri Lankan politics over the last couple of decades. And we had the second brother, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, becoming president after Mahinda Rajapaksa. And we have been through 2.5 years where he came in with a huge mandate. He had 2/3 of parliament to support him. Yet he changed the constitution, and with the constitutional change, he got more power to himself. It's called the 20th Amendment, and that made him bypass parliament and also bypass a cabinet of his own party. And there has been a revolt recently where the cabinet resigned, and it has created a lot of instability. What has happened in the last few days is, since the protesters were attacked, people across the country came out, and this forced Mahinda Rajapaksa, the former president, who was the present prime minister, had to immediately vacate, and they are basically being protected by the armed forces at the moment. So this is the ground situation.
Mr. Wickramaratne, if you can tell me, first of all, there's some information that's now come in that UNP leader Ranil Wickremesinghe has now been sworn in as the Prime Minister. This changes a lot of things. If you can tell us, with just one seat in the 225 member parliament, how is this going to really work out? What is the opposition going to do?
Yeah, so it's clearly, he has only one seat in parliament, right? And therefore he can only be brought with the support of the Rajapaksas, who, though they don't have a following in the country and the people all want them out, they in parliament they have, as you know, a majority, and clearly he becomes a representative of Prime Minister of that majority.
Will the opposition support him? The other opposition parties?
I don't think there will be any support from any opposition party. We are the largest opposition party, the SJB, right? And there will be no support from the SJB. There will be no support from the TNA. There will be no support from the JVP. These are the main opposition parties in the country.
So let's only talk about SJB, because earlier Mr. Sajid Premadasa had said that he would be devising a strategy if this were to happen. So what is your strategy at this point?
Yeah, so they have only appointed the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister is supposed to nominate his cabinet, and he has been fishing for members of the opposition to join his cabinet, and that certainly I can't see anything like that happening. It won't be forthcoming. So he will have to then go and appoint people from the Rajapaksa supporters and clan. And I don't think that that's going to get Sri Lanka out of its present crisis, because the crisis is about the Rajapaksas, and the Rajapaksas have to go, right? And there has to be transparency in this process. So, and then the markets are looking for political stability. The IMF is looking for political stability. And I can't really see any of that happening. Then in addition to that, it complicates it because the magistrate in the city of Colombo basically put travel bans on the Rajapaksas and on their allies today. And that was at the request of the Attorney General. So that shows how complicated this situation is. So I frankly don't think that this is going to be a way forward. This might create more turmoil.
But if it causes more uncertainty, wouldn't it be a problem for the country, for the people who are currently facing a lot of problems? There are protests. What is the solution then? Shouldn't the opposition be looking towards bringing about a solution instead of, increasing uncertainty that's already there?
Yeah, so we have already put forward a proposal, and we have suggested that if the opposition leader takes over as Prime Minister, and then he will bring his cabinet, right, and then we will move forward from there. Now, certainly that's something we are ready to do. That's why it was conveyed to the President. However, if there is another government, but a government that's going to be acceptable to the people without any deals with the Rajapaksas, then I think that it's possible for us to actually, even if we are not in government, to support that government, because we really want to ease the burden of the people, in their homes and on the streets.
So your proposal still stands with the conditions. Is that what you're saying? And that you're also willing to support the government, the new government that comes in, but without the Rajapaksas?
Yes, our proposal stands, and we are willing to take the responsibility and govern and take the country forward. Or otherwise, any government that comes without any deal with the Rajapaksas, because the main slogan of this protest was Gota, go home. That's the name of the president, Gotabaya, go home. And therefore, we cannot be seen to be having any truck with them in actually forming a government. So if they form another government which is acceptable to the people, even if we are in opposition, we will certainly extend our support, because we want to see the problems in this country basically ease off.
And the SJP is willing to let this go on, considering the governor had recently, just yesterday, said that he would quit if the central bank governor, if the uncertainty continues. And by the looks of it, it is going to continue. So what's going to happen then?
Yeah, so this is basically, we need to remember this, right? We handed over a country, right, which was in good shape, an economy in good shape, right? A country where there was law and order, a country in which there was a budget deficit that has reduced, lots of reforms had been undertaken. And then, right, in a very short period, they have created this problem. And therefore, the president has to take responsibility for actually creating this problem, the president, right? So they have created the problem and now they're trying to get out of it, right? Surely they need to figure out a reasonably acceptable way where the population will accept in actually resolving this problem, not to go and complicate it further. So I see it as a further complication. So we will have to just wait and see how things will be over the next 2-3 days. So it's unfortunate. We are not responsible for the political uncertainty, and I have to say that categorically. And therefore, I think everybody needs to understand that the president is responsible for creating political stability because only he has that constitutional right to do that. Therefore, he should be making the right decisions.
I also want to now talk to you about finances. You were the former state minister of finance as well, so you obviously have a better understanding of what is really going on. And if we can look at it from 2 points of view, one is China's point of view, and the other is India's point of view. A couple of data points where the central bank governor yesterday mentioned that Sri Lanka would be defaulting on all of its external debt, which is $51 billion, considering it's run out of foreign exchange for imports. How worrying is that, considering China is the government's biggest bilateral lender and owns at least 10% of that?
Yes, the financial situation is grave because the country has run out of dollars and reserves. So we clearly have a huge balance of payments issue. And on the other hand, we also have a huge budget deficit. It's completely out of control. Revenues have collapsed, and expenditures are there. And the debt servicing was not possible, and that's why the government gave notice that debt will not be serviced. So addressing these issues is very complex because while the macroeconomy is in turmoil, the situation on the roads and the situation in the homes are very troubling. There is a shortage of gas, which is largely used for cooking. Then there are electricity cuts, which Sri Lankans are generally not used to. There are queues to get petrol and diesel, and these queues running sometimes to kilometer or two. So this is an unprecedented crisis. Shortage of some essential medicines and foods and things like that. So to overcome this crisis, there have to be some immediate actions taken by any new government, and then there will have to be long-term actions. So the immediate actions is that the new government, right, will have to work with the multilateral agencies and with friendly countries in getting bridging finance. So the bridging finance will have to be utilized mainly on the essentials. So we'll have to try to get cash or credits on oil supplies, and that's mainly for transport. And then that will have to be also useful in terms of power generation because we have hydro renewable and we are using coal and we are using some oil as well. So that will be one. Then fertilizer subsidies, fertilizer credits might also be required because we need to make sure that the harvest and agriculture and harvest is not affected by it. We need some bridging finance on essential foods and essential medicines and pharmaceuticals, that will be required. I must say that India has stepped up to it and provided credit suppliers, credit lines, both for essential items and for oil. So that has been done. The relationship with India is a long-standing relationship. It's a cultural relationship as well. And so that has happened in the first phase. We will need to, we will need more help than that, the new government. Also, they have also helped us financially with the currency swaps, just to help us with the cash flow. China has helped us even in the past, particularly in terms of goods and services. China is also a lender to Sri Lanka. The lending, of course, is largely at commercial rates. And there has been some discussions the government has had with the Chinese, who have given some indication that they are willing to assist. But still, we have no suppliers credits or anything like India has given. But that discussion has very recently commenced between the government and China. So the short-term package is get the bridging finance in place, get the people off the queues and the streets. That's the short term. The longer term things are the discussions with the International Monetary Fund and coming to an agreement, because that will help raise Sri Lanka's ratings. And if the ratings go, you'll have access to capital markets, right? And investors will get confidence. And then we'll have commenced the debt restructuring. We're just putting the structures in place, and we need to look at it because we'll have to restructure our debt because our cash flows won't allow us to service all the debt for a period of time. And then we have pushing through the reforms will clearly cause lots of issues for the poor, the vulnerable, the daily wage earners. We have to protect them. So we will have to have an extensive social welfare protection scheme in place. Otherwise, we will not be able to take the hard decisions on pushing through economic reforms. And then the banking sector will have to be recapitalized. So some of those are the bridging finance is the short-term measures. The others are more mid-term to long-term.
All right. So for that to even happen, there needs to be a stable government, and the next couple of days are going to be extremely crucial. Mr. Wickramaratne, thank you so much for joining us and speaking to us here.
Thank you, Amitha. Thank you.